Oh. Oh, nice. That looks great.
Hi.
Hello. All right, let them show us their plants and then we'll get started.
Are those the anemones? Beautiful flowers.
Beautiful flowers, and they're growing, which is very exciting. Better than last year, Sena, when none of our bulbs grew. Daffodil bulbs did not grow.
I planted my daffodil bulb from last year in my yard because it didn't bloom in its pot.
Yeah.
And this year it grew, but it doesn't have it didn't blossom.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a really good one. Is that just one bulb? That's impressive.
I know. I couldn't understand how so many sprouts were coming from it.
Yeah, Miss Blair, that's so cool. Oh, I love it. Thank you for sharing. Okay,
Miss Esther, did you see the message in the chat from Miss Nessie?
Oh, I see that.
Okay.
Okay, I do now.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, where did Mr. Lopez go? Mr. Lopez should try again, because now he just disappeared.
Oh, Miss Connolly's on. Excellent.
Yep. Hi, Miss Connolly's class. Do we see them?
Miss Connolly, do you know if Miss Marine's class is going to join us? Oh, Miss Blair, if you're, she's
getting on right now.
Oh, and there's Mr. Lopez. Great, great.
All right, we've got everybody now, Miss Sena, so we can get going.
Thank you to all of our classes for being so patient and well behaved while we were waiting for everyone to get on. I'm really impressed with your behavior.
Absolutely. So I am going to, Miss Sena, do you have a video that you want to share today, or are you just going to talk?
I do have my presentation. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. So I'm going to pin you and I'm going to make you a co-host. Do you want to make
I have no sound for whatever reason. I'll be.
What's that?
I said I have no sound for whatever reason.
We can hear you.
You can hear me.
Yes.
Okay.
Miss Connolly, sometimes logging off and then logging back in can help. I don't
I'll
know.
try that.
Yeah, sorry.
I don't know what's going on.
All right, friends. So we're going to get going. Thank you for all being so patient. So we have with us Miss Sena Wazer, who has been presenting to our students in this grant since she was 9 years old. And Sena, you're 18 now, right? Yes. So 9 years old, and she and her sister worked really, really hard on their family's farm, and they would come in and speak to our students. So I thought it would be really, really great to have her come and speak to us now. I think you probably started your training in presenting to large groups with our grants, right? Yeah, and now Ms. Sena speaks to thousands of people at a time. So she's pretty cool. We're very excited to have her. I'm going to pin you, and then you can just take over. All right. And I'm recording. So here we go.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. All right. I hope everyone's having a nice day. I'm very excited to be with you guys. All right, let's see. Okay, awesome. All right, so as was mentioned, I grew up on a farm in Mansfield, Connecticut, and my family's farm is named Shunda High Farm. And so that is a Western Shoshone word, so it's a Native American word, and it means peace and harmony with all creation. And so that was the kind of idea or kind of the thought that my parents wanted to farm with. And so the farm was started in 2009 when I was around 5 years old and my sister was about 3. And we've had a farm ever since, although we don't farm full time anymore. But what I want to start by doing is introducing you to my family and then talking a little bit about what we grow and kind of what it's like to grow up on a farm. Also, I just want to know if you have any problems hearing me or if there gets to be a lot of background noise, just let me know because I'm not at home, so it might be a little bit different. But anyway, so going back to my family, this right here is my mom, Raluca, and her and my dad, Edward, they farmed together and full time for about 10 years. we were farming mostly. And then this is myself and my sister, Ayana. And so we helped out a lot as well as kids and as we got older. And so I want to start by talking a little bit about what we grow and what we store. And so what we grow is the plants that we plant on the ground and that we tend to. And then what we store is when we take those plants or we take like the vegetables or fruits that they produce and we keep them for a long time. So sometimes we keep like apples, for example, over the winter. So that way we're not just eating them when they're growing, but we can eat them for a very long period of time. All right, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through it by month. So different times of year, right, when we have different temperatures, different things can grow. So April through May is kind of chilly, right, although it's starting to get really nice now, but generally is chilly. And so not a lot of things grow, but there are still some vegetables that do. So right here we have mushrooms, shiitake mushrooms, and they're something that can grow when it's cooler outside, and they also like when it's kind of wet and moist. And so they actually grow out of these logs, which is what you can see happening right here. Another thing that we have during April and May, April through May, and also really most of the year is lettuce. So we grow lots and lots of lettuce, have lots of salads. We also have radishes, which are a little bit spicy if maybe some of you guys haven't had them, but they're really good. You can have them in salad, you can eat them by themselves. And so that's a nice thing that also grows when it's cooler outside. Starting in June, we start to have a lot more vegetables. And so I'm going to ask you guys some questions, and I know that audio might be tricky. So if we want to put it in the chat, that's fine, or unmute, however you guys think is best. But I guess I'm curious if any of the students might know what this vegetable right here is that grows around June, usually. Oh, I see some hands. I'm excited to hear what you guys think. Lettuce. It looks a lot like lettuce, spinach. Okay, so we got some good guesses. It's neither of these things, but yeah, definitely good guesses. It has a very lettucey look. Cilantro, not cilantro, but it is cabbage. Very good. Yeah, so this is cabbage. And the reason that it might not look super familiar is because when cabbage grows, it has a lot of leaves. And some of these leaves are really big and they kind of tilt out a little bit. But then when you sell cabbage, you pick the cabbage and then you take those outer leaves off. And so then you get this. And so this is maybe what we're more used to seeing in the grocery store. But it's same plant. It's just differently prepared. Something else that we have in June is broccoli. So we start to get that. And then we also have these right here. Now, who knows what these might be? Any ideas? Carrots, very good. You guys got it on the first guess. Yes, these are carrots. And so this is kind of a weird shot of them because you're really just getting the tops of the carrot. And the thing about carrots is that they grow mostly under the ground, and then this is the top right here. And so once you pull them out of the ground and you wash them off a little bit, then they look like this, which is probably, again, what we're more used to seeing. And so something really cool about carrots is that they're really, really tall. And so the top of the carrot is maybe like a foot tall, so it's not that big. And then there's like the little part that we actually eat. But below that, under the ground, there's this huge network of roots. And so their roots go like 7 feet deep, which is like taller than the tallest person that you know, most likely. And so that's something really cool about carrots is that they have these really, really long roots, which is important for them because that's how they get water, that's how they get nutrients. And so it allows carrots to grow and to taste really good and to have all those, kind of important things that they have in them. So that's something cool about carrots. We also start to get strawberries in June, which is really exciting because over the winter, even if you store things, they're just not the same. And so when you start to get fresh fruit, that's super exciting. So that's something that I'm looking forward to for next month. We also get peas. And so this is kind of a different type of pea than what you might normally eat. It's called the sugar snap pea. And so a lot of times when we buy peas in the grocery store, they're just like the small, like green, like balls. But this kind of pea, you can not only eat the small green balls inside, but you can also eat the husk, which is this part right here. And they're really good. They're kind of sweet and like crunchy and just really good. And you can eat them plain, like sometimes just go outside and just, you know, take one off the vine and eat it, or you can make it and like cook it and do different things with it that way. July, August, September. So July, August, and September are really warm, right? They're kind of like the hottest months. And so because of that, and because we get a lot of sun, those are also the most productive months. And so we have the most vegetables. And so something that we start to get during these months is eggplant. And so we get lots and lots of eggplant and we sell it, and we also just eat it a lot as a family. We also get cherry tomatoes. So cherry tomatoes are just like regular tomatoes, except for that they're small and they make a really good snack. And they're nice and sweet. And these ones over here, they're called sun golds, and those are especially sweet. They're always kind of a favorite, I think, for most people. We also get big tomatoes. So these are probably the ones on the left are probably the ones that you see most often in the store. And then all of these kind of pinkish ones are called heirloom tomatoes. And heirloom tomatoes are really tender and they're like really, really good at sandwiches, but they're harder to sell because they bruise more easily and sometimes they get kind of nasty if you don't eat them like quickly. We also get lots of this kind of vegetable right here. Now, who knows what this is? There are two vegetables in this one picture. Okay, cucumber, good guess. They do look like cucumbers, but that's not what they are. Squash, yes. So squash is one thing, and then there's another thing that is very, very similar, but like a different word. Pickle. So a pickle is a cucumber that you ferment, and so it's not a pickle, but it's close. But squash is a very good guess. So yeah, right here we have squash and we have zucchini. So maybe some of you have had like zucchini bread before. That's something that people make with it. And so that's something that I make a lot of with this zucchini right here. You can also just cook it kind of regularly and fry it and then just eat it for dinner or something like that. So we have lots of squash and zucchini. We also have watermelon, which is super exciting. Yeah, lots of good watermelon. You can see this one's really like these ones are really big over here.
I'm in
And
the
we
middle of a
also
workshop with my 2nd and 3rd graders.
oh nice.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, okay, sorry, no problem. Okay, these right here are cucumbers. So we do get lots of cucumbers during this time, and we do make pickles with them actually. So that's a nice thing that we get to do. And then as we start to get later on in the season, we see corn, which is super fun. As you can see, this is my sister when she was younger. As you can see, she was very, very excited about the corn. And so that's something that we get, and we can make like corn on the cob. And then there's also a different kind of corn, which you dry it out. And once it gets all dry, you can make like corn flour with it or cornmeal. And then you can make different things with that. We also get peppers. So these are red bell peppers right here, which are really good. We get lots of peaches. So we have an orchard that my dad planted. And so one of the fruits that's in that orchard is peaches. So we got lots of that. And then we also start to get apples around like September, October timeframe. And so we have all these different kinds of apples here, and we can make all sorts of different things, right? We can make applesauce, we can make apple chips, we can just have them like plain. And then another vegetable that we also start to get later in the year is something called Asian pears, which a lot of folks might not be as familiar with. But what Asian pears are is they're this kind of really juicy, really sweet pear. And they have this kind of golden color. And they're really good. They're something that I personally don't love them, but most people really enjoy them. So if you ever get a chance, there's something to try, although the ones in the store sometimes aren't quite as good. But all right, so as we continue to get later in the year, something else that we have a lot of is potatoes. And so this is my sister and I when we were younger picking potatoes. You do get very dirty, but it's also kind of a lot of fun because what you do is you kind of dig through the ground and you find the potatoes. And so it's kind of like a treasure hunt because you're digging, you don't know when you're gonna find one, and then you find a potato, and it's very exciting. So that's something we get a lot of as well. All right, so October through April. So October through April is, again, those kind of chillier months, and there's not a lot of sun, so not a lot of plants and vegetables are growing. But something that we do during this time is we store a lot of vegetables. So we have what's called a root cellar, which is kind of a room in the basement of our house that's cooler. And so we keep it at kind of a cold temperature. And when we put things in there, they stay good for a really long time. So something that we get is these beans right here. And these are the kind of beans that you can make chili with, or you could do like beans and rice. And so this kind of bean grows on the plant in these husks that are right over here. And they start out green, but then you leave them there and they dry out and they become this kind of like white yellowish color. And then once that happens, you open them and you get these beans out. And then you dry those beans again, and then you can make like chili or whatever you have, that kind of thing with them. We also get lots of onions and garlic, and then we keep that all year. So like right now we're still using garlic as well as some onions from last year in cooking. And then we also have lots of other things. So during this time of year, we get squash. And so I know that this kind of looks like pumpkin, but it's actually called Kubota squash. And so it's a type of squash that is really good. You can make all sorts of things with it. And then this is butternut squash. And also a word of warning on the Kubotas is that I did try and carve them as pumpkins because I was like, wow, so cool. Like this pumpkin looking thing did not work. They're very, very hard, but they do taste good in cooking. We also get this green called Claytonia. And so Claytonia is a winter green. And so it grows when it's cold outside, although we usually keep in our greenhouse, which makes it a little bit warmer. But you grow it during the winter and it's really nice and juicy. And it's nice to have something kind of fresh when there aren't a lot of other things growing. We also grow this other thing. What is this? Do you guys know? What do you guys think this green is right here? It was, yeah, spinach. Very good. Yeah, so this is spinach, and again, is something that grows when it's cold out, and it actually gets pretty sweet when it's cold, which is kind of like not normal for most vegetables, but spinach is one of those things that you can eat when it's winter and when it's chilly. We also store a lot of different vegetables. So these right here are turnips that we can store during the winter. We also store carrots and cabbages and other things like potatoes. We store lots and lots of potatoes. And then all these different things right here. And so this over here is roasted red peppers. And so we roast them and then we do this thing called canning, which just basically keeps them good for a long time. We have applesauce, apple chips, dried cherry tomatoes. So this is where we take the cherry tomato, we cut it in half, and then we dry it out, and then it stays good for a long time. And then this is corn, which we can make like cornmeal with, and then do something like cornbread. This is a grain called amaranth, which you can use to do kind of like oatmeal. It's a little bit different, but kind of similar. We have beans and tomato sauce and pickles. And there are lots and lots of options for different things that you can do with vegetables to keep them good for a long time. All right, and so with that, I wanted to talk a little bit about farmers' tasks for farmers' daughters. So these are things that my sister and I did as kids to help my parents out, because farming is a lot of work. And so we would go out and we would help them with different tasks. And so one of the things that we helped with was picking peas. And peas are really tall, as my sister's demonstrating here. And so we would go outside and we would pick them. And a lot of times, like, we would pick the ones that were low down because we were kind of short. And then my dad would pick the ones that were taller. And that way we would get all the peas. And then this is a more recent picture of my sister picking peas in the rain. We also picked watermelon. So picking watermelon was kind of fun because we would get to like eat some of the smaller ones. And watermelon's kind of funny because it's hard to tell if it's ripe because you're just seeing the outside, and it's not really about the size because there are watermelons that are small, watermelons that are big, and they're all ripe. And so the thing that we have to do is we flick them with our finger, and depending on the sound that they make, you know whether or not they're ripe. And then another way to find out if they're ripe is by looking at this little curly thing right here. And if that gets kind of brown, then it means that the watermelon is ready to be picked. We also helped pick a lot of tomatoes. This was actually one of my least favorite things to do because picking tomatoes takes such a long time. But something that we helped a lot with was picking cherry tomatoes. And so this right here you can see is a row of cherry tomatoes. And we would go outside and we'd help for like 2 or 3 hours, my dad, with picking tomatoes. And so this right here is us picking. And so something that you'll kind of see as the season goes on is that in the beginning, it's relatively easy to pick them. But as it gets later, they get kind of they change a little bit, and it becomes really easy to kind of crack them open. And the thing with selling tomatoes is that people don't really want to buy tomatoes that are cracked open. And so we'd have to be really careful when picking, which would just make it kind of longer. But that was something that we helped a lot with. And then, when we sell them, they look all pretty, but something that I think is really important to remember is that, the vegetables that we're buying at the farmer's market or in the grocery store a lot of times look really, really nice, and they look very well put together. But there are so many hours of work that went into getting them there and getting them ready and all of that. Another thing that I did a lot of was picking kale. And so this over here is kale. This is not. But I picked a lot of kale, and that was something that my dad and I would do. And sometimes we would like race and see who could pick more kale faster. And so picking kale is pretty easy. You just kind of snap the leaf off, and then you get a bunch, like maybe like 10 together, and then you put an elastic band around them, and then they're ready to sell. And so that was something I spent a lot of time doing. Other farm jobs. So a lot of things have to be done like every week or sometimes every couple of days. So picking kale would happen like once a week, but picking cherry tomatoes has to happen like every 2 days. But then there are other jobs that only happen like once a year. So right here, I'm trellising cucumbers, and then it's my sister doing the same thing. And the thing about trellising cucumbers is that you only do it when they're small. You only do it in the spring. And so the reason that we did this was so that way the cucumbers would grow up the string, and when you're picking, you don't have to bend over as much. And so it just makes it a lot easier, and it's less difficult for the person. We also did other things like picking up hay, which in itself was not a very fun job, but afterwards we got a hayride, so it all worked out. Another thing that I did a lot of was cooking lunch. So as I mentioned, my parents were really busy, and so something that was really helpful for them was to be able to come inside and have food ready. And so this right here is spinach pie, which is something that I just made like last week. And it's actually really easy to make, and it has a lot of spinach in it and eggs and all sorts of different things. I also made a lot of eggs and potatoes. We had chickens, which I'll talk about later. And so we would eat a lot of fresh eggs and then our potatoes as well. And then sometimes I also made fancier things like pretzels. All right, so tending to chickens. So something that my sister and I did for basically most of our lives was taking care of our chickens. And so my sister's job was always the food. So right now here, she's carrying a sack of food to the chickens. And that was something that we had to do every day, sometimes even multiple times a day, to make sure that they were well cared for. And then here she's like shaking it to make sure that they have easy access. And then the thing that I did was I brought them water. So I'm filling up my buckets, and then I would go over, and here I'm like getting all the ice out, because when it's really cold, the water gets kind of icy, and so you have to like scrape it out. And then I would hang up the water container so that they could drink it. And now who knows why we might hang up the water? Like why do you think we would hang it as opposed to just putting it on the ground? What do you guys think? Any ideas? Oh, I see some hands.
Teachers, let me know if you want to type your answers in the chat, or if you want, you can like put a little hand up and I can call on students to respond as well.
Okay, yeah, so I see a couple answers. So the bugs don't crawl into it, so chickens don't have to bend down. So it is true that I think less bugs get in the water because it's hanging, but a lot of the bugs that are around can fly. So they can still fly into the water if they so choose. Are there any other ideas why we might hang it? Those are good guesses though. Keep waste out. Yeah, that's a good point. That is true. Yeah. Any other ideas? Okay, so the reason that we hang it, and we do it for food too, but it's really more important for water. Yeah, and so they don't spill. Very close, yeah. The reason that we hang it is because otherwise, if it's on a hill and we put the water there, then all the water just runs out, and then the chickens don't have any water to drink, which is a really big problem. And so the reason that we hang it is to make sure that they always have easy access to their water and that it doesn't all run out. because if there's one thing that the chickens need more than anything else, it's to have access to water. And so the thing about having animals and having a farm more broadly is that it doesn't matter how rainy or snowy or bad the weather might be, you still have to take care of your animals, because the animals are counting on you every single day to bring them food, to bring them water, to make sure that they're safe. And so this is my sister and I during like a pretty big snowstorm that we had, where we were going out there to bring our chickens food and to bring them water. And it wasn't always a lot of fun. That's why like I don't have chickens, because I got a little tired of taking care of them. But if you do have chickens, or if you do have an animal or a farm, it's really important to kind of take care of them every single day. And so when it snowed, something that we had to do was shovel out the chicken coop. Now, why do you think we might shovel the chicken coop? Do you guys have any ideas? And this is one of those things that it's a little bit connected to the last question that I asked, if you guys remember what the answer was for that.
So again, students, you're thinking about and sharing with your teachers, why do you think the chicken coop would have to get shoveled out in the winter? Why'd they have to get the snow out of there? If I'm looking at the picture, I can actually see some of the hens. They're hanging out above, right?
Yeah. So we had perches for them because chickens like to be off the ground. So they don't like to. Yeah, so they don't get stuck in the snow. It is true, chickens really don't like snow. So having like less snow on the ground, they definitely appreciate it. So the chickens can move around and lay eggs. That's also a good point. So they can walk on the snow. They don't want to walk on the snow, but they can if they have to. Any other ideas for the chickens? Yeah, they definitely don't like snow. Yeah, so those are all really good answers. And so it was definitely partly because chickens, they really are not happy about walking in the snow. But another really big reason is because, wrong side. Because otherwise we can't hang the water. And so if we can't hang the water, if it's on top of the snow, then it will all drain out. And so it's kind of that same reason of making sure that they always have access to that water. And so that's why I was spending my time shoveling out the chicken coop here. Sometimes when we're taking care of chickens, we also got a little surprise. So one day we walked into the chicken coop and there was this cute little opossum sitting there. And so opossums are very cute. They don't really harm the chickens or people, but they do eat all the eggs. And so that's a bit of a problem for us because we have chickens to lay eggs so we can eat them and we can sell them and all of that. And so we had to make sure that we could keep the opossum out in the future. Sometimes we also got other kinds of surprises. So this is one of our chickens. Her name is Cutie Pie, who had chicks one year, which were very sweet. And so that was always exciting when we had chickens. Another thing that we have, another animal that we have is cows. And so at some point we had like 7 cows. Right now we only have 3. But we have cows that are called Dexters. That's their breed. And so Dexters are what's called a tri-purpose breed, which means that you can milk them. So we get fresh milk from them. You can eat them for meat, and you can also use them to pull things like plows. That's not something that we do because we have a tractor, which is a lot easier. But we do milk them. So this is after my mom milked one morning, and this is like the little cow sniffing. And so we do milk them, and then we also eat them sometimes, which is quite challenging because it's really sad, when you get to know the cow and then it's kind of like a pet, and then, eating it is really sad. But that is something that we do. And so this is, again, fresh milk that my mom got. And then from that milk, we would do all sorts of different things. So we'd make yogurt, we would just drink it, and we also made cheese. And so this right here is like hard cheese. So it's something like a Parmesan or like the kind of, regular cheese that you might buy in the store. And then this right here is feta. So it's softer and it's really salty, which is why it's in like that watery thing, because that's called a brine, and that gets it nice and salty and flavorful. And then this is a picture of my mom eating her cheese and her jam, both of which she made. And yeah, likes to enjoy for breakfast. All right, and so with that, I want to turn to talk a little bit about pests and beneficials. So pests are something that harms our farm, and beneficials are something that help us. And so there are pests and beneficials of all different sizes, and I'm going to talk about some of those right now. So what do you guys think this is? Do you think it's a pest or a beneficial? And I see that there was a question in the chat. I can answer that at the end. Yeah, do you guys think that this caterpillar right here is a pest or a beneficial? Pest. Yeah, very good. Yeah, so it is a pest. And so you can actually see right here, it's like eating this thing right here. And so this is called a tomato hornworm. It's got this little horn right here. And they eat lots and lots of tomatoes. And so they can actually be a really big problem. And in some years they killed a lot of tomato plants because they ate so many. And then this little wasp right here, while we might not all sometimes be so fond of bees and wasps, is actually a really big beneficial for our farm. Because what this wasp does is it lays an egg inside the tomato hornworm. And then from that, yes, you can see right here. And then from that grow all these little cocoons with more wasps, and it kills the tomato hornworm, which is, you know, sad for it, but is really helpful for farmers because the tomato hornworms eat all of our vegetables. And so these wasps help us kind of control the tomato hornworm population. All right, so I want to tell you a little story about this caterpillar right here. So this caterpillar is also a pest. It was eating a lot of our vegetables. And so one year my parents decided to bring it inside and kind of just like see what happened because they were curious about its life cycle. So they took this caterpillar, they brought it inside, and they saw it cocoon, which is normal because normally caterpillars, they cocoon, and then from that cocoon comes this moth. And so they were like, okay, cool. But instead of having a moth come out of this cocoon, this wasp right here came out. So they were a little confused because normally wasps don't come out of cocoons. And so what they figured out is that what happened is there was this caterpillar, and then this wasp right here, the mother wasp, laid an egg inside the caterpillar. And so then when it was cocooned, when the caterpillar created this cocoon, the baby wasp took over and killed the caterpillar, and then the wasp came out of the cocoon. And so that's kind of like a crazy story a little bit, but it's very helpful for our farm again because the caterpillar was eating all of our vegetables. And so there are also lots of different kinds of beneficials. So this right here is a praying mantis, and praying mantids are beneficials because they eat, again, a lot of bugs that would otherwise harm and eat our crops. There are also bees, and bees are a really big beneficial because they do something that's called pollinating. And so they take pollen from one plant and bring it to another, and that allows the plant to make fruits and vegetables. And so that's really, really important for us. And so this right here is a honeybee, and this one is a bumblebee, and they're both pollinators. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about something else. So this moth right here really likes cabbage and broccoli. And we'll eat all of our cabbage and broccoli, which is a big problem for us because we need to sell it, and people generally don't like to buy vegetables that have a lot of holes in them. And so something that we could do is we could spray our vegetables, and we could spray kind of chemicals on them that would kill the moth. But the problem is that there are also beneficials like bees that are on those plants. And so if we spray them with pesticides, then the moth will die, which is good for us. But the bee will also die, which is a really big problem for farmers. And so instead of spraying pesticides on our plants, what we did is we went outside and we squished the bugs by hand, which is a little bit nasty, but it is a really kind of important way for a farm like us to keep pests under control. Another thing that we did is we cover some vegetables with nets. So if you remember the picture of the kale, there was a net covering that, and that is a way to keep pests out. Another beneficial insect is this earthworm right here. So this earthworm, kind of goes through the soil and it makes little holes, which make it easier for air and oxygen and water to move through the soil. And so if you see a lot of earthworms, that's actually a really good sign. It means that the soil is healthy. So earthworms are another beneficial insect. All right, insects and chickens. So we have chickens for a number of reasons. So we do eat their eggs, and when chickens get old, sometimes we eat them too. But another reason that we have chickens is because they eat a lot of insects. And so after a plant grows and it kind of gets too old to eat it anymore, we would move our chickens over and then they would get to eat the plant, which is great. And they would also eat the bugs. And so right here, you can see the chickens kind of scratching the dirt and then they're looking for bugs and eating them, which is really helpful for our farm. Another animal that we had are ducks. So we had this super cute baby duck one year, which these are its parents. And ducks, kind of same as chickens, eat a lot of bugs, especially ticks, which is very great. All right, rodents. So rodents are a pest that we had to deal with a lot. And the thing about rodents is that they eat vegetables that grow under the soil. So they eat lots of carrots, they eat beets, which is what we have right here. They eat potatoes. And so this is a really big problem for our farm because those are, again, vegetables that we need to sell or eat ourselves. So what do you guys think we could do to deal with our rodent problem? What are some possible solutions? What do you guys think? How can we deal with this problem? Mouse traps and cats. Very good. Yeah. So those are the two things that we did. So we do have a lot of mouse traps, but the thing with mouse traps is that rodents live under the ground. So it can be kind of complicated because you can't really get the mouse traps under the ground. So we would more put those like in our shed around our grain. But we did do cats. So we have 4 cats. So this right here is Cookie, who's a little lazy, but very sweet. So it's fine. We also have his brother Snowflake, who is a good hunter. This is their mom LT, who here again looks very lazy, but is a great hunter. And this is our other cat, Midnight. And so we have these 4 cats who spend most of their time outside and they do a lot of hunting, which is really helpful for us in terms of keeping our rodent population under control. And once we got cats, we had a lot less problems. And I see there was a suggestion to get an owl. That's actually a good idea. I don't know how it would go in terms of getting an owl for ourselves, but any owls that are in the area are very helpful. Okay, so final pests I want to talk about are deer. So deer sometimes will come into our farm and they'll eat all sorts of vegetables. They eat everything from strawberries to corn to lettuce to like basically everything that we grow. And so this was another really big problem that we had to figure out how to deal with. And so what we did was we put up an electric fence. And so this is like a really tall fence because deer jump really high. So it's like 8 feet tall. And we put this up and then we have electricity that runs through the wires. And so it's turned off in this picture because my sister's putting it up. But once like we leave, we turn the electric fence on. And then if a deer tries to go through, it zaps them a little bit. And like I've been shocked, it's not that bad, but it kind of deters them from trying to come into our farm again. And so with that, I'm going to stop talking. And if you guys have any questions, and I know that there's a question about cheese, I would be happy to answer them. So I guess, should I start with the cheese question and then wait for other ones?
Yeah, why don't you start with the cheese, and then teachers, it's up to you how we sort of do the Q&A. If you're more comfortable typing some of those questions in the chat, go ahead. Or if you do want to like raise a hand and have kiddos share out loud, I can like unmute one at a time. So Sena, if you could talk about the cheese, and then I am seeing some questions pouring on the chat.
Yeah, so for cheese, there are different types of cheese that you can make, but basically what you do is you get the milk and you heat it up and you put this thing in it that kind of makes it, it's called curdle, but basically it gets kind of thick. And actually if you put like lemon juice in cheese, you'll kind of see this happen, but we don't use lemon juice, but you put this thing in cheese, it gets kind of thick, and then you cut that all up. You squish it really hard, depending on the kind of cheese that you're making, and you get kind of a lot of the water out. And then for like a hard cheese, you put it and you just let it sit for like 2 or 3 months. Sometimes even like certain cheeses sit for like 2 years. And so you let that cheese sit, and then it gets this like really nice flavor. And then you can eat that. Or sometimes you make like a softer cheese, which is basically you don't let it sit for as long. So you can make it like, today and then eat it tomorrow. Okay, I see a lot of questions. How do you get eggs from the chickens in the coop? So you might actually, let me find the picture. You might have seen in some of the pictures, we have these kind of like little boxes. And so the chickens lay their eggs in those boxes. Let me share my screen again real quick. So the chickens lay their eggs in those boxes, and then we can just go in there. So right here, she's in one of those boxes. And so they lay their eggs in the box, and then we can go in and we can kind of just take the eggs out. Some of them, if they're like sitting there, they might try and peck you, but generally they lay their eggs and then they leave. So it's not too difficult to get them. Watermelons can get really big. I don't have an exact number for you, but they can get quite large. Maybe like, I would say maybe like a normal one's like 3 to 5 pounds, but some of them can get a lot larger than that.
And do they
Yeah.
taste less sweet as they get bigger?
Not necessarily. It's more just about how ripe they are. So there
Okay.
can be like, I've had ones that are like this big that are really good. And then you can have one that's like,
Okay.
much larger. Yeah. Let's see. How do you make jam? So jam is pretty easy to make actually. So let's say like it's strawberry jam, and you could do basically the same thing with any jam. You take the strawberries, you maybe chop them up a little bit, you put them in a pot with some water generally, and like some sugar and this thing called pectin. And you put that all together and you mash them up, and then you just let them boil. And what the pectin does is it helps them kind of like form a jam substance. So it's not just like kind of water and fruit. And then you let that sit for a while. So it gets like the water boils off and it's thicker. And then you can take that and you can put it in a jar and freeze it or can it and then keep it for a while. What's your favorite farm animal? I really love our cows. The ducks are really cute too, but the cows are my favorite, unfortunately. So the corn, basically you just wait until it gets kind of like a large-ish size. So if you go to the grocery store, you'll notice that they kind of have a similar diameter, most of them, or like they're a similar size. But the other thing that you can do is kind of just like peel down the top a little bit and check the inside. And if it's yellow, then it's ready. But if it's like whitish, then it's not ready yet. Okay, what's my favorite vegetable in the garden? Oh, I love carrots. Carrots are really good. But there's this other vegetable called fennel, which I don't have a picture of, but it has a really good kind of like fresh taste. So I really love fennel, and sometimes we would bake it and we would put cheese on it, and that was one of my favorites. Yeah. How do you milk a cow? So the way that we milk our cows, so some people use machines, but my mom is the one who did most of the milking, and she would do it by hand. And so what we did was we have what's called a stanchion, which is basically the cow puts their head in, and then you have like food there, and then you close it so that way they don't like walk around, because that would be really hard. And then you kind of stand next to their udder, which I don't think I have a picture of, but that's where the milk is. And you like milk them. Like there's a certain hand movement that you use, and that kind of gets the milk to come out. But it is something that you have to learn, and your hands have to get kind of strong, because otherwise at first it's quite hard to do. You have to get used to the movement. Ooh, how long can carrots get? That's a good question. It depends on the variety of carrots, but some of them, I don't know, some of them can get pretty long, maybe like 8 inches long, I would say. I'm not too good with estimating length, but something along those lines, I would say. Oh, what is the hardest vegetable to grow? Oh, that's a good question. I'm not sure if there's one that's hardest. There's just some that take a lot more time. So something like lettuce, you have to water it a lot, and it kind of needs like constant attention and tending to, or like tomatoes, you have to be constantly picking them. Whereas other vegetables, you kind of just plant them and then you leave them. So like garlic is really easy. You don't have to do a lot of taking care of them. Once you plant it, you basically just like leave it for a few months. So there's just like different kind of methods of taking care of things, I think.
Sena, can you talk a little bit about what it was like to work on the farm and not go to school like
Yeah.
the way that all of our friends do, and kind of how you spend time with other kids.
Yeah. Yeah, so I was what's called homeschooled. So my parents taught me. And so that kind of worked out pretty well for our family because most vegetables grow in the summer. So obviously we don't have school during the summer. So we would have that time where we could help, and my sister and I were not always the most excited about working on the farm because it is a lot of work, and doing something like picking tomatoes was literally 2 or 3 hours of just like one thing. So it got kind of like boring, and we were not very excited about it, but it's still something that we had to do. So we did it. And then during the winter we were homeschooled. And so my parents would teach us. And so, yeah, it worked out well most of the time. It had its pluses and minuses, but we saw a lot of other kids mostly through like getting together with our friends, and we had friends who were homeschooled, so we had that. But we also did sports for basically our whole life, and so that was a really good way to be with lots of other kids.
Sports and clubs. I remember you did that.
Yeah.
So, so do you think your parents did a good job of homeschooling you?
Yeah, I yes, my mom did a good job.
So my friends, I want you to know that Miss Sena is 18 years old, and she is graduating from UConn. Or if you've already graduated, right? Because they had
I graduated last week.
She graduated from UConn at 18, right? So she went to college super early, and she was the youngest graduate at UConn this year. Hooray!
Thank you. Yeah, I'm very excited. Yeah.
Which is pretty cool.
Thank you.
And can you does anybody else have any questions that they want to ask before we've got a couple of hands.
Oh, yeah. And I see a question in the chat. Why do you think the job of a farmer is important for the community? I really like that question. Yeah, I guess I would say it's really important because something about having a local farm that's really nice is that a lot of times having produce and having vegetables and fruits that are grown in your town or in your area is really important, because that way they're actually harvested when they're ripe and they're kind of like at their best. So sometimes when we grow when we buy vegetables in the grocery store, they're from like California or another country or just like somewhere really far away. And so that's fine, but the kind of problem that sometimes happens is that they have to be harvested when they're not actually ready yet, because otherwise you can't transport them so far without them getting like bad. And so when you have a farmer in your local community, then they're just selling it directly to you. They're making sure it's ripe. And so that's really important. And a lot of local farms, and especially like the family farms, smaller farms, are also more focused on being sustainable and making sure that they're not harming the environment and the planet when they're farming. So that's another reason why I think that, yeah, having farmers in the community is important.
And your family absolutely did that.
Yeah, that was one of our main focuses. Yeah.
And just so you know, friends, for a really long time, and still, I will get vegetables from Sena's family farm, right? And that's how, because I wasn't very patient with my garden and nobody helped me. So I decided that it was just easier and better for my family to get fresh fruits and vegetables from Sena's farm, and some eggs sometimes too, right? Yeah. Any other questions?
Oh, I see a question.
There's another question.
Yeah.
Do your cows have babies?
They do. So we have calves, they're called, every single year, because to get milk from the mother cow, she has to have a baby. And so each year the cow has a baby, and then and then we milk our cow. And so the thing with that is that we don't have a lot of land, we don't have a lot of grass, so we can't have like 20 cows because that would be too many. And so some of our cows, we sell them and we give them to other people who also want cows, but sometimes we can't sell them, and so we have to eat them instead. And so as I mentioned earlier, like that can be really hard because they're kind of like pets sometimes, but that is something that happens. My plans now that I've graduated are to work in policy and government and help the environment that way. My major was environmental studies, so very much related. And my favorite fruit, okay, I really want plums. We have 2 plum trees. They have not produced any plums yet, so I'm very sad. But I also really love apples and peaches. Oh, and blueberry. Well, we have raspberries. So I think raspberries. Now I just listed all those other ones. Raspberries, I think, are my favorite. Oh, I'm not very good with apple varieties, but we have a lot of different ones. So we have, well, it's a type of tree called tall spindle apple trees. And so they're really tall and skinny, and they kind of like could potentially fall over. So we actually have to put wires and trellises on them. But that is a type, I guess, of tree that we have. And then we have like 20 different varieties. So they all come in, they all taste a little bit different, and they all come in at different times of year. So that way we have apples for many months.
Very nice.
Yeah.
All right, anything else? Miss Stephanie, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, I could talk about farm stuff all day because
Me too.
I used to work on a farm as well. So I have a lot of personal connections.
That's great.
But I saw the students were really engaged and the students shared some really great questions. So I can't thank you enough for sharing about your family's farm and the
Yeah,
work
of
that you
course.
did.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I want you to know, Miss Sena, that we are going to be doing, just want to make sure before I say anything. Yep. We are going to be doing some additional work with our students around fruits and vegetables and animals on the farm, and what you get from the milk from the cows, which our favorite thing is ice cream. So we'll be learning all about that and doing some hands-on stuff as well.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I
Yeah.
hope you guys have a good time learning about all
Yeah.
those things.
All right, what do we say to Miss Sena?
You're welcome.
Bye.
All right. Bye, everybody. Have a great day. Thank you
All
so
right,
much.
thank you very much.
Bye.